The ship was dying. Knew this the way he knew his own hearts were beating too fast and too weak. The old vessel groaned around him like a wounded animal, and the lights flickered in patterns that spoke of failing power cells and broken circuits. He stood at the bridge of the refugee ship, his 4 thin arms wrapped around his chest as he watched the darkness of space through the cracked viewing screen. Behind him, his people huddled in the cargo holds and sleeping chambers. 342 souls. That was all that remained of his kind. They had once been a proud species. They had built cities that floated among the clouds of their home world. They had created music that other species traveled across star systems to hear. They had lived in peace for 10,000 years. Then the burning came. Did not like to think about the burning. The memories were too fresh, too painful. He could still see the flames falling from the sky. He could still hear the screams of millions. He could still smell the smoke that had choked his world. Now there was nothing left, just this broken ship and the survivors who trusted him to find them a new home. The communication panel beside him sparked and went dark, another system failing, another piece of hope crumbling away. "Elder," a soft voice said from behind him. He turned to see a young female with pale blue skin and large eyes that held too much sadness for someone so young. She had been a teacher before the burning. Now she served as his second in command because everyone else who could have held that position was dead. "What is it?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "The engine room reports that the main power core is failing. We have perhaps 6 hours before complete shutdown." Closed his eyes. 6 hours. That was not enough time. They were still 3 days away from the nearest safe port, and that was assuming the navigation system did not fail as well. "And the backup systems?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Silence told him everything. He nodded slowly and turned back to the viewing screen. The stars looked cold and distant. They offered no comfort, no help. In all the vastness of space, there was no one who would come to save them. "Should I tell the others?" asked quietly. "No," said, "let them rest. Let them have a few more hours of peace before." He could not finish the sentence. Stepped closer to him. "There must be something we can do, some way to call for help." "We have tried," reminded her. "We sent distress signals to every nearby system. No one answered. No one ever answers when called for help. The galaxy has decided that we are not worth saving." It was a bitter truth. They were a peaceful species. They had no military, no weapons, no powerful allies. When the burning came, they had begged the Galactic Council for help. The Council had debated for 2 weeks, and by the time they reached a decision, there was nothing left to save. "The emergency beacon," said suddenly. "The old one in the storage bay, we never used it." Looked at her. "That beacon is over 100 years old. It probably does not even work anymore." "But if it does?" Eyes held a small spark of hope. "It broadcasts on all frequencies, Elder, even the restricted ones, even the military ones. Someone might hear it." "Someone might," agreed. "But who would come? We are in neutral space, far from any major power. The only ships that travel through this region are." He stopped. His blood ran cold as he realized what kind of ships patrolled this section of space. The whispered, her face going pale. There were predators. They came from a death world called Prime, a planet of endless storms and savage beasts. They had evolved to hunt, to kill, to dominate. When they discovered space travel, they turned their predator instincts toward the stars. They did not conquer worlds, they harvested them. "If the hear our signal," could not finish. "Then we die faster," said grimly. "But we are dying anyway. At least with the beacon, there is a small chance that someone else might hear it, someone who might actually help." It was a desperate hope, but it was all they had. Nodded slowly. "I will go to the storage bay. I will try to activate the beacon." She left the bridge and was alone again with his thoughts and the dying ship. He watched the stars and wondered if any of them held salvation, or if they were all just cold lights watching him lead his people to their end. In the cargo holds below, the surviving slept or tried to sleep. Mothers held their children close. Elders whispered prayers to gods who seemed to have abandoned them. Young ones stared at the walls and remembered homes they would never see again. Was one of these young ones. She was barely 12 cycles old, and she had seen more horror in her short life than any child should ever see. She sat in a corner of the cargo hold, hugging her knees to her chest, watching the flickering lights with empty eyes. Her mother had died in the burning. Her father had died trying to get her to the evacuation ships. She had no one left, and she did not understand why she had been allowed to live when everyone she loved had died. An old male named sat down beside her. He had been a baker in the old world, and his hands still smelled faintly of the spices he had used in his famous sweet breads. Now those hands shook with age and exhaustion. "You should try to sleep, little one," he said gently. "I cannot sleep," replied. "Every time I close my eyes, I see the fire." Nodded, he understood. They all understood. The fire haunted all of them. "I used to tell stories to Mai," he said. "Would you like to hear one?" Shrugged, but she did not tell him to go away. That was as close to a yes as was likely to get. "Long ago," he began, "before our people learned to fly among the stars, there was a young who wanted to find the end of the sky. She climbed the highest mountain and reached for the clouds, but the sky was always beyond her grasp. So she built a ladder of songs, each note carrying her higher than the last." As told his story, others began to gather around. The children came first, drawn by the gentle rhythm of his voice. Then the adults joined, hungry for any distraction from their fear. For a few moments, they could pretend they were not on a dying ship in the middle of hostile space. They could pretend they were back home, gathered around a fire, listening to stories as their ancestors had done for thousands of years. But the illusion could not last. A loud noise echoed through the ship. The lights flickered violently and then dimmed to a faint red glow. Emergency power. The ship's last reserves. In the storage bay had found the old beacon. It was covered in dust and the casing was cracked, but when she connected it to a small portable power cell, the lights came on. It still worked. She hesitated, her finger over the activation switch. Once she pressed it, there would be no taking it back. The signal would go out to everyone and everything in range. It could bring salvation. It could bring death. She thought of the children in the cargo holds. She thought of elders standing alone on the bridge. She thought of all the who had died and all the who might still live if someone, anyone, answered their call. She pressed the switch. The beacon hummed to life. Its signal burst outward into the void, traveling at the speed of light in all directions. It was a simple message, repeated over and over in every known language. "This is the refugee vessel. We are damaged and dying. 342 survivors. Please help, please, anyone help." On the bridge, heard the beacon's signal begin broadcasting through the ship's speakers. He closed his eyes and said a silent prayer. The signal traveled outward. It passed through empty space. It bounced off asteroids and was absorbed by nebulae. It seemed to vanish into the infinite darkness. But signals do not simply disappear. They travel forever, growing weaker but never stopping. And sometimes, against all odds, they find ears that are listening. 8 hours away, a warship picked up the signal. The captain, a massive creature covered in scales and scars, smiled with too many teeth. "Easy prey," he growled to his crew. "Change course, we hunt." 11 more ships received the message and altered their paths. 12 predators now raced toward the dying vessel. But the signal traveled in all directions, and 12 hours in the opposite direction, it reached another ship. A different kind of ship. A human ship. Captain was in her quarters when the signal came through. She had been reading a book, trying to relax after a long patrol when the emergency alert sounded. She was on the bridge in less than 2 minutes. "What do we have?" she asked, sliding into the command chair. Her tactical officer, a young man named Ho, turned to face her. His expression was grim. "Distress signal, Captain. Refugee ship. They are reporting critical system failures and have 342 survivors on board." His jaw tightened. She knew what had happened to everyone in the galaxy knew. It had been a tragedy of unimaginable scale, and the galaxy's response had been shameful. Location: neutral space, Sector 74, approximately 16 hours at maximum speed. "And that is not all," another officer named said from her station. "I am detecting signatures heading toward the same location. 12 ships. They will arrive in approximately 8 hours. The bridge went silent. Everyone knew what that meant. 12 warships against a helpless refugee vessel. There would be no survivors. Stared at the star map on the main screen. The ship was represented by a small blue dot, barely visible. The fleet was shown as 12 red dots, moving steadily closer. "Can we reach them in time?" she asked. Ho shook his head. "Not at standard speed. Even at maximum, we would arrive 8 hours after the—" "What about emergency speed?" Looked up sharply. "Captain, emergency speed would burn out our engines. We would be stranded." "I did not ask about the consequences," said quietly. "I asked if we could reach them in time." Ho ran the calculations. His fingers moved across the console and numbers flickered on his screen. After a long moment, he nodded. "If we engage emergency speed immediately, we can arrive 30 minutes after maybe less." 30 minutes. It was not much time, but it was something. Looked around the bridge at her crew. These were her people. They had served with her for 3 years. They trusted her, and she was about to ask them to risk everything for strangers. "I will not order anyone to do this," she said. "This is not our mission. This is not our sector. By all rules and regulations, we should report the signal and continue our patrol." She paused. "But there are 342 people on that ship. 342 people who have already lost everything. If we do nothing, they will die." The bridge was silent. Then Ho spoke. "I joined the fleet to protect people, Captain. All people, not just the ones who are convenient." Nodded. "My vote is yes." One by one, every officer on the bridge voiced their agreement. Felt a warmth spread through her chest. Pride. These were good people, the best she had ever served with. "Then we go," she said. She turned to the helm. "Engage emergency speed. Take us to Sector 74. The ship shuddered as the engines roared to life. The stars outside the viewing screen stretched into long lines of light as they accelerated beyond normal limits. Across the void, the ship continued its slow drift toward death. Stood on the bridge, unaware that salvation and destruction were both racing toward him. He did not know about the fleet. He did not know about the human ship. He only knew that he had done everything he could, and now all that remained was to wait. To wait and to hope. But hope was a fragile thing, and in the darkness of space, it seemed very small indeed. The fleet moved through space like a pack of wolves running through a dark forest. 12 ships, each one bristling with weapons and from 100 battles. They were predators, and they had caught the scent of prey. On the lead ship, Commander stood at the center of his bridge, his massive form casting shadows across the dim red lighting that his species preferred. He was old for nearly 40 cycles, and his body showed the marks of his long life. Scars crossed his scaled face. One eye was clouded and blind. His left arm had been replaced with a mechanical limb after a battle with a rival clan 3 decades ago. But his other eye was sharp, and his mind was sharper still. He had not survived this long by being foolish. "Report," he growled, his voice like stones grinding together. His second, a younger name, checked the sensors. "The signal is still broadcasting, Commander. They have not moved. They cannot move. Their engines are dead." Nodded slowly. This was almost too easy. A crippled refugee ship, defenseless and alone, carrying hundreds of passengers. It would not even be a hunt. It would be a harvest. "What species?" he asked. "Commander." Lips pulled back from his teeth in what passed for a smile among his kind. The peaceful, weak. Their flesh was said to be sweet, though himself had never tasted it. Their home world had burned, and the galaxy had done nothing to help them. Now the last of them drifted in space, waiting to die. "Time to arrival?" he asked. 6 hours, Commander." Good. Turned to look at the rest of his bridge crew. They were all eager, all hungry. It had been too long since their last real prey. Cargo ships and trade vessels were easy targets, but there was no sport in them. No challenge. This would not be challenging either, but at least there would be plenty of meat. "Send word to the other ships," ordered. "Standard hunting formation. We approach from all sides. No escape." Nodded and began transmitting the commands. On the refugee ship, time passed slowly and painfully. The emergency power kept the most essential systems running, but heat was not considered essential. The temperature inside the ship had dropped significantly, and the survivors huddled together for warmth. Had not left the bridge. He stood watching the darkness, waiting for something, anything to happen. The beacon continued its endless broadcast, and the silence continued its endless answer. Came to him with a cup of lukewarm liquid. It was supposed to be tea, but the heating systems were barely functioning, and it tasted like nothing. "You should rest, Elder," she said. "You have been standing here for hours." "I cannot rest," replied, "not while my people are in danger." "Your people need you strong. If help does come, they will need you to lead them. You cannot do that if you collapse from exhaustion." Took the cup but did not drink. "Do you really believe help will come?" She was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "I believe in trying. That is all any of us can do." It was not an answer, but appreciated her honesty. False hope was worse than no hope at all. In the cargo holds, the mood was grim. The cold had seeped into everyone's bones, and the dim red emergency lights cast everything in a bloody glow. Children cried, and their parents tried to comfort them with words that rang hollow. Continued to tell his stories. He had gathered a small group around him, mostly the young and the very old, and his gentle voice was a small beacon of warmth in the cold darkness. "And the young looked down from the top of the sky," he said, "and she saw her home world below her, beautiful and green and alive. She had reached the end of the sky, but she had also found the beginning of everything else." Little listened with half-closed eyes. She was very tired, but every time she closed her eyes completely, the fire came back. So she kept them open, focused on his kind face, and let his words wash over her. "What happened next?" a small boy asked. Smiled. She came back down, of course, and she told everyone what she had seen. And from that day forward, they looked up at the sky not with fear but with wonder, because they knew that beyond the blue, beyond the clouds, beyond even the stars, there was more. There was always more. "Is there more for us?" asked quietly. Smile faltered for just a moment. Then he reached out and gently touched her hand. "There is always more, little one, always." He hoped he was not lying. On the bridge, the sensor console suddenly came to life with a harsh beeping sound, and both turned to look at it, their hearts racing. "What is that?" asked. Moved to the console and studied the readings. Her face went pale. The blue of her skin turned almost white. "Ships," she whispered, "multiple ships incoming fast." For one brief moment hope flared in his chest. Someone had heard them. Someone was coming to help. Then looked up at him, and the terror in her eyes killed that hope instantly. "They are, Elder, 12 warships." Felt the world tilt beneath his feet. He gripped the edge of a console to steady himself. 12 warships. Against a crippled refugee vessel with no weapons, no shields, no hope. "How long?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. 4 hours, maybe less. 4 hours. That was all the time they had left. 4 hours until the predators arrived. 4 hours until the last of them were slaughtered like animals. Should I? Swallowed hard. Should I tell the others? Wanted to say no. He wanted to give his people a few more hours of peace, a few more hours of ignorance. But they deserved better than that. They deserved the truth. Yes, he said, tell them, let them. Let them say goodbye to each other. Let them prepare. Nodded and left the bridge. Stood alone, watching the sensor display as the 12 red dots grew closer and closer. He thought about his life, about everything he had done and everything he had failed to do. He thought about his people and how he had led them to this end. He should have done more. He should have found a way, but there was no way. There never had been. In the cargo holds, his announcement was met with stunned silence. Then the silence broke into chaos. Some people screamed. Others wept. A few tried to pray to gods who had never answered. Stood still as the news washed over him. He looked down at the children gathered around him, at Little with her empty eyes, and he made a decision. Come, he said quietly. Come, children, let us go to the observation room. I want to show you something. The children followed him, too dazed to question. Their parents let them go, perhaps grateful to have them away from the panic. The observation room was a small space with a large window that looked out into space. The stars were beautiful here, bright points of light scattered across the infinite darkness. Gathered the children around him and pointed up at the stars. Do you see them? He asked. All those lights. Each one is a sun like the sun that warmed our home world, and around many of those suns there are worlds, worlds full of people, full of life. But the bad ships are coming, a small boy said. The monsters. Yes, admitted. They are coming, but look at all those stars, little one. Look at how many there are, and do you know what? In all that vastness, in all those billions of lights, there are good people too. People who care about others, people who would help if they could. Then why are they not helping us? Asked. Was silent for a moment. Then he said, perhaps they do not know we are here. Perhaps they are too far away. Perhaps they are coming and we just cannot see them yet. It was a thin hope, a desperate hope, but it was all he could offer. I want you to look at the stars, he continued, and I want you to remember something. No matter what happens, you carry within you thousands of years of music and art and love. That can never be taken from you. That will live on even if we do not. The children looked up at the stars, and for a moment the fear in their eyes was replaced by something else, something like wonder. Meanwhile, the fleet drew ever closer. On his ship, Commander was growing impatient. The hunt was taking too long. His crew was restless, eager for blood. He could smell their anticipation, thick and sharp in the recycled air. Can we not go faster? He demanded. We are already at maximum speed, Commander, replied. Any faster and we risk engine damage. Growled but said nothing more. Patience was not a virtue among his kind, but it was sometimes necessary. Tell me about he said, settling back into his command chair. I want to know more about our prey. Pulled up the data files. There were a Class 3 species, Commander, herbivorous, pacifistic. They had no military capability and relied on treaties and trade agreements for protection. And how did that work out for them? Asked with a dark laugh. Not well, Commander. Their home world was destroyed by a cosmic event approximately 3 standard years ago. The survivors have been scattered across the galaxy. This group appears to be one of the last significant populations. Last of their kind. His tongue flicked across his teeth. That will make them even more valuable. Rare meat fetches high prices. Some of his crew shifted uncomfortably. Not all were comfortable with the practice of eating sentient beings. It was considered barbaric by most of the galaxy, but was from an old bloodline, one that remembered the ancient ways. Commander said carefully, There may be political consequences if we are seen attacking refugees. The Galactic Council. The Galactic Council did nothing when the burned interrupted. They will do nothing now. They are weak, all of them. The galaxy is full of prey that has forgotten it is prey. Nodded and returned to his console. The hours passed. On the refugee ship, they waited for death. Some spent their last hours with family. Others sat alone with their thoughts. A few couples found private spaces and shared final moments of intimacy. Parents held their children and whispered promises they could not keep. Remained on the bridge, he had turned off the beacon. There was no point anymore. Help was not coming, only death was coming. He watched the sensor display as the red dots grew larger and larger. 3 hours, 2 hours, 1 hour. Elder said softly. She had returned to the bridge, unwilling to face the end alone. It has been an honor serving with you. Took her hand. The honor was mine. You would have made a fine leader in another life. Perhaps in the next one, she said with a sad smile. They watched the darkness together. Then they arrived. The 12 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and formed a circle around the refugee vessel. They were massive, each one 10 times the size of the ship. Their hulls were dark and angular, designed to intimidate as much as to function. On his bridge smiled his terrible smile. Open a channel, he ordered. Let them see their death. The main screen on the bridge flickered to life, and found himself looking at the most terrifying creature he had ever seen. The commander filled the screen, his scaled face twisted into an expression of cruel amusement. Vessel said, his voice booming through the speakers. I am commander of the Imperial fleet. You are surrounded. Your ship is crippled. You have no weapons, no shields, no hope. Forced himself to stand straight. If he was going to die, he would die with dignity. What do you want? He asked, though he already knew. Laughed. It was an ugly sound. What do we want? We want you, little one, all of you, your flesh, your bones, your screams. We have traveled far and we are hungry. Behind made a small sound of horror. You could let us go, said, knowing it was futile. We have nothing of value. We are just refugees. You are meat, replied. That is all the value you need. He leaned forward, his one good eye gleaming with predatory hunger. Prepare to be boarded. If you resist, we will make your death slow. If you submit, we will make them slightly less slow. The screen went dark. Stood frozen. Around him, the bridge was silent except for the soft sounds of crying. This was the end. But then, impossibly, the sensor console beeped again. Looked at it, not understanding. Another ship, but they were already here. Who else could possibly? The readings made no sense. The ship was approaching at impossible speed, leaving a trail of overheated energy in its wake. It was burning out its own engines to reach them faster. And it was not. What is that? Whispered, wiping her tears. Shook his head. I do not know. I have never seen energy signatures like that before. The approaching ship suddenly dropped out of faster-than-light travel, appearing directly between the refugee vessel and the fleet. It was smaller than the ships, but there was something about its design that spoke of violence and power. On his bridge, roared in surprise. What is this? He demanded. Identify that ship. Checked his sensors and his face went pale. For the first time in his life, he felt something very much like fear. Commander, he said slowly, that is a human warship. The word hung in the air. Human. Single eye narrowed. He had heard stories about humans. Everyone in the galaxy had heard stories. They came from a death world called Earth, a planet of extremes and violence where everything had evolved to kill everything else. And the humans had evolved to survive it all. They were small by standards, soft-looking, easily broken, but they were also relentless, unpredictable, and absolutely insane by any reasonable measure. They were the galaxy's nightmare. and one of their ships had just placed itself between and his prey. "Open a channel to the human vessel," ordered, his voice suddenly cold and careful. "I want to speak with their commander." On the human ship, Captain stood on her bridge and watched the fleet spread out before her. 12 ships, all of them bigger than hers, all of them armed to the teeth. Behind her, Ho reported, "They are hailing us, Captain." Smiled, it was not a kind smile. "Let them wait," she said. "I want them to think about what they have gotten themselves into." Through the viewport, she could see the tiny refugee vessel, battered and dark and barely alive. 342 souls, about to be slaughtered by predators. "Not today," she thought, "not while I am here." She straightened her uniform and prepared to meet the commander. The real standoff was about to begin. Captain stood at the center of her bridge, her eyes fixed on the main. The fleet spread before her like a wall of death, 12 warships bristling with weapons and dark intentions. Behind them, barely visible, was the tiny refugee ship they had come to save. She had exactly one ship against 12. The odds were not good. But had never been one to care much about odds. "Status report," she said calmly. Ho spoke from his tactical station. "Engines are burned out, Captain. We will not be moving fast anytime soon. Weapons are fully operational, shields at maximum." "They are still hailing us," added from communications. "Their commander seems impatient." "Good," said. "Impatient enemies make mistakes." She took a moment to study the enemy formation. They had arranged themselves in a standard hunting pattern, surrounding the refugee ship from all sides. It was a formation designed for a helpless target, not for a fight. They had not expected opposition. "Open a channel," ordered. "Let us see what commander has to say." The flickered and the face of the commander appeared, studied him carefully. He was massive, even for his species, and covered in scars. His single eye gleamed with intelligence and cruelty. But there was something else there too, uncertainty. He was not sure what to make of her. "Good." "Human vessel," began, his voice a low growl. "You are interfering in business. Remove yourself from our path or face the consequences." Did not respond immediately. She let the silence stretch, watching's face for any sign of discomfort. After a long moment, she saw it. A tiny twitch near his remaining eye. He was not used to being ignored. "Commander," she finally said, her voice perfectly calm. "I am captain of the TSS Horizon. I received a distress signal from the vessel behind you. I am here to assist them." "They are our prey," snarled. "They belong to us. This is not your concern." "I disagree," replied. "When helpless people are about to be murdered, it becomes everyone's concern." Leaned forward, his eye narrowing. "You are one ship, human. We are 12. Do the mathematics. You cannot win this fight." "Perhaps not," admitted, "but I can make sure you do not win either." There was a flash of something in his eye. Recognition, perhaps, or maybe just surprise. He had not expected her to be so direct. "You would die for strangers?" he asked. "For creatures you have never met, that is foolish." "Perhaps," said again. "My species has never been known for its wisdom, but we have been known for other things." She let that hang in the air. Every species in the galaxy knew about humans. They came from Earth, a world that should not have produced intelligent life. The planet was a death world, full of creatures that killed and ate each other, full of diseases and disasters and environmental extremes. And humans had evolved to survive all of it. They had survived ice ages and volcanic eruptions. They had survived predators and parasites. They had survived each other, which was perhaps the most impressive feat of all. And when they finally reached the stars, they brought all of that survival instinct with them. "I know what humans are," said slowly. "You are death like us. You understand the law of the predator. The strong take from the weak. That is the natural order." "We understand it," agreed. "But we do not accept it. Humans chose a different path." A weak path. Perhaps, but it is our path. Stepped forward closer to the screen. Let me tell you something about humans, Commander. We are not the strongest species in the galaxy. We are not the fastest but we have one quality that sets us apart from every other Death World species we have encountered. She paused, making sure she had his full attention. We protect others. We see someone in danger and something inside us will not allow us to look away. We call it compassion. Some species call it madness. Either way, it means that I will not move from this spot, not while those refugees are in danger. Was silent for a long moment. Then he laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the bridge. You are insane, he said. All humans are insane. It is the death world in your blood, but insanity does not win battles. Numbers win battles. Weapons win battles. Then let me show you our weapons, said quietly. She turned to Ho. Broadcast our combat classification, all channels. Ho's fingers moved across his console. A moment later, data began streaming from the horizon to every ship in the area. On the flagship, watched as his console lit up with incoming information. His eyes went wide. Commander, he said, his voice unsteady, you need to see this. Turned to look at the data, his face changed. The information was simple. It was the Galactic Council's official classification of Earth and its inhabitants. Every species had such a classification, a standardized measure of their home world's danger level and their evolutionary adaptations. Earth was classified as a death world, Category 9. The scale only went to 10. But that was not what makes blood run cold. It was the detailed analysis that followed, the list of Earth's dangers, the volcanic activity, the tectonic instability, the extreme weather, the predators, the parasites, the poisons, the diseases that killed millions. And most importantly, the section on human beings themselves. Pursuit predators, endurance hunters, capable of tracking prey for days without rest, capable of surviving injuries that would kill most species, capable of adapting to almost any environment, capable of using tools and tactics to overcome any physical disadvantage. And then there was the psychological profile. Humans form pack bonds with almost anything. They will fight and die for creatures that are not even their own species. They have been observed protecting prey animals from predators, nursing sick aliens back to health, and sacrificing themselves for beings they have just met. This behavior appears to be instinctual and cannot be suppressed. Read this last part several times. He had heard rumors about human behavior, but he had always assumed they were exaggerated. No species could actually be that irrational. But the data was clear. Humans were exactly that irrational. They would die for strangers. They would fight impossible odds for creatures they did not even know. They were death who had evolved not to be predators, but to be protectors. And they were absolutely terrifying. Commander said quietly, perhaps we should reconsider. Turned back to where Captain waited with an expression that revealed nothing. You think this changes anything, he growled. Classification data means nothing. You are still one ship against 12. True, said. But let me tell you what that one ship will do, Commander. When you attack, we will focus all our fire on your flagship. We will ignore every other target. We will pour everything we have into destroying you personally. She let that sink in. We may not win, we may not even survive, but you will definitely die. You, Commander, not your fleet, not your species. You. Is that a price you are willing to pay for some refugee meat? The bridge of the flagship was very quiet. His claws dug into the arms of his command chair. He knew she was not bluffing. Humans never bluffed. It was one of the many things that made them so dangerous. You are asking me to give up a hunt, he said slowly, to walk away from prey that is already caught. Do you know what that means for us? I know, replied. It means shame, dishonor, but dishonor can be lived with, Commander, death cannot. The silence stretched between them, on the refugee ship, and watched the standoff with disbelieving eyes. They could hear the communication between the human captain and the commander through the open channel, and they could not understand what they were witnessing. One human ship, one small vessel placing itself between them and certain death. "Why would they do this?" whispered. "They do not know us, they owe us nothing." Shook his head. "I do not know. I have heard stories about humans, but I never thought." He trailed off, unable to finish. In the cargo holds, the survivors had gathered around any screen they could find, watching the impossible scene unfold. Held little close, his old heart beating with something he had not felt in a very long time. "Hoping. Look," he whispered to the children around him. "Look at that ship. Do you see it? That is a human ship. They came. Someone came." "Will they save us?" asked her voice small. Watch the standoff. Watched the human captain face down 12 predator ships with nothing but her words and her will. "I think they will try," he said. "I think they will try very hard." On the flagship, Commander was doing something he had never done before in his life. He was hesitating. The logical part of his mind told him to attack. He had 12 ships. The human had one. Even if she destroyed his flagship, his fleet would still win. The prey would still be taken. But another part of his mind, a more primitive part, was screaming at him to retreat. It was the part that remembered what it meant to be prey. Humans were not like other death. They had evolved on a world where the strong survived by being the strongest predators. Humans had evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them, and they had survived by being too stubborn to die. That stubbornness was visible in Captain's eyes. She would not back down. She would not run. She would fight until she was destroyed, and she would take as many with her as possible, including him. "Commander," said again more urgently, "the crew is waiting for your orders." Looked around his bridge. His officers were watching him, waiting to see what he would decide. Some were eager for battle, others looked uncertain. He thought about his reputation. He thought about the shame of walking away from a hunt. He thought about what the other commanders would say. Then he thought about dying. "Pull back," he said finally. Blinked, "Commander." "Pull back," repeated, his voice harsh. "Order the fleet to withdraw. This prey is not worth the cost." There was a murmur of surprise among the crew. No one had expected this. Turn back to the where Captain waited with that same unreadable expression. "You have won this day, human," he said, forcing the words out through clenched teeth. "But remember this. We do not forget. We do not forgive. Someday, somewhere, we will meet again, and when we do, there will be no talking." "I look forward to it," replied calmly. The screen went dark. On the horizon's bridge, Ho let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. "They are retreating, Captain. All 12 ships. They are moving away." Nodded but did not relax. She would not relax until they were far beyond sensor range. "Maintain battle readiness," she ordered. "They might change their minds." But they did not change their minds. One by one, the warships turned and accelerated away, disappearing into the darkness of space. Within an hour, they were gone. The refugee ship hung alone in space, damaged and dark but no longer surrounded by death. On the bridge, fell to his knees. "They left," he whispered. "They actually left." Was crying again, but this time the tears were different. "We are alive. We are still alive." In the cargo holds, a great cheer rose up. People embraced each other, laughing and weeping. Children danced and sang. For the first time in years, they allowed themselves to feel joy. Held tight as she sobbed into his chest. "They saved us," she said, her voice muffled. "The humans saved us." "Yes, little one," replied, his own tears falling freely. "They did. They came all that way, and they stood between us and death, for no reason except that they could." He looked up at the screen, where the human ship was visible, small and battered but unbroken. Perhaps the galaxy is not as dark as we thought, he said softly. Perhaps there are still lights we cannot see. On the horizon, Captain finally allowed herself to sit down. Her legs were shaking, and she realized she had been standing rigid with tension for the entire confrontation. "Well done, everyone," she said quietly. "Well done." Looked up from her console. "Captain, the ship is hailing us. Their leader wants to speak with you." Nodded and composed herself. "Put him through." The flickered to life, showing an elderly alien with 4 arms and skin the color of old paper. He was on his knees, tears streaming down his face. "Captain," he said, his voice breaking, I was, the leader of the survivors. I do not have words to thank you for what you have done." "No thanks necessary," replied gently. "We did what any decent ship would do." "No," said, shaking his head. "No other ship would do this. We sent our signal across the stars and no one answered. Only you, only humans." He pressed his 4 hands together in what appeared to be a gesture of profound respect. "We will never forget this. As long as a single lives, we will remember the name of Captain and the ship Horizon. You gave us back our lives. You gave us back our hope." Felt a warmth spread through her chest. This was why she had joined the fleet, not for glory or adventure, but for moments like this, moments when she could make a real difference. "We will escort you to safety," she said. "Our engines are damaged, but we can still travel at reduced speed. It will take time, but we will get you somewhere safe." Captain said, fresh tears falling, "How can we ever repay you?" Smiled, a real smile this time. "Live," she said simply. "Rebuild. Remember who you were and become who you want to be. That is all the repayment we need." Bowed his head, overcome with emotion. And across the void, 2 ships began the slow journey toward safety. One large and powerful, one small and broken, moving together through the darkness toward a future that suddenly seemed much brighter than before. The galaxy was vast and often cruel, but sometimes in the darkest corners of space there were lights that refused to go out. Humanity was one of those lights, and they burned very, very brightly indeed. The fleet had not retreated far. Commander sat in his private quarters aboard the flagship, staring at a wall covered with trophies from 100 hunts. Skulls and bones and preserved specimens, each one a reminder of prey he had taken, of victories he had won. But today he had no victory. Today he had turned away from a hunt. Today he had shown weakness. The door chimed and entered. "Commander," he said carefully, "the other captains are requesting a meeting. They want to know why we retreated." Did not turn around. "Tell them we encountered unexpected resistance." "They saw the human ship, Commander. They know it was only one vessel. They are questioning your decision." Now turned. His single eye was cold with fury. "Are they questioning my authority?" Swallowed. "Not yet, but there is talk. Some of them think we should return, finish what we started." Was silent for a long moment. He thought about the human captain, about the look in her eyes when she had threatened him. She had meant every word. She would have died rather than back down. And she would have taken him with her. But his crew did not understand that. They had not been the ones staring into those terrible, calm eyes. They had not felt the weight of her certainty pressing down on them like a physical force. "Assemble the captains in the war room," said finally. "I will speak with them." An hour later, 11 commanders gathered around a holographic display table. They were all seasoned warriors and battle-hardened, each one commanding a ship and hundreds of crew members. And they were all angry. "This is disgrace," growled Captain, the oldest among them. "We had the prey surrounded, we had them trapped, and we turned tail and ran from one ship." "Not just any ship," another captain said. "A human ship. You know what humans are." "I know what humans are," spat. "I know they are meat like everything else. I know they bleed. I know they die. One ship cannot stop 12. "Then why did we not attack?" A third captain demanded, turning to, "Why did you order the retreat?" Stood at the head of the table, his massive frame casting shadows across the room. He let them argue for a moment, let their anger build. Then he raised one clawed hand, and they fell silent. "You want to know why we retreated," he said slowly. "I will tell you, but first let me ask you a question. How many of you have hunted a human before?" Silence. "How many of you have seen a human fight? Really fight, not in training simulations or entertainment vids, but in actual combat?" More silence. "I thought so," began to pace around the table. "You have all heard the stories. Humans are dangerous. Humans are unpredictable. Humans come from a death world, but you do not understand what that means. Not truly." He stopped beside the holographic display and called up an image. It was Earth, the human home world. Blue and green and white, deceptively beautiful. "This is where they come from," said. "A world where 70% of the surface is covered in salt water that will kill you if you drink it. A world where the ground itself moves and cracks open without warning. A world where the sky throws bolts of lightning and the water freezes and falls from the clouds." He changed the image to show various earth creatures: sharks, lions, crocodiles, venomous snakes. "These are some of the predators that share their world. Any one of them could kill a human easily, but humans do not avoid them. They do not run from them. They hunt them. They eat them. They wear their skins as trophies." The captains shifted uncomfortably. "And then there are the invisible killers," continued. "Diseases that humans cannot even see. Tiny organisms that invaded their bodies and killed billions of them over thousands of years. And you know what the humans did? They learned to fight back. They developed medicines and treatments. They turned their own bodies into weapons against the invisible enemies." He turned to face the assembled commanders. "But the most dangerous thing about humans is not their world or their predators or their diseases. It is their minds." Called up another image. It was a human warrior, clad in primitive armor, standing in a field of bodies. "This is from their history. A single human standing against an army. He fought for hours. He killed dozens of enemies before they finally brought him down. And this was considered normal behavior for their species. Expected even. One warrior does not frighten me," said, but his voice was less certain now. "It should," replied, "because that kind of madness is in all of them. They will fight when they cannot win. They will stand when they should run. They will die before they surrender, and they will take as many enemies with them as possible." He deactivated the holographic display. "That human captain was not bluffing when she said she would destroy my ship. She was stating a fact. If we had attacked, she would have focused everything on me. Not because it was tactically sound, not because it would help her survive, but because humans believe in something they call spite." The word was unfamiliar to the other commanders. "Spite," explained, "is the desire to hurt an enemy even when it provides no benefit to yourself. It is irrational, it is wasteful, and it is one of the most dangerous weapons in the galaxy, because an enemy who acts out of spite cannot be predicted or controlled." He returned to his place at the head of the table. "I retreated because the prey was not worth the risk. 300 in exchange for my life. That is not a trade I am willing to make. If any of you feel differently, you are welcome to go back and test the human for yourself." No one moved. Smiled grimly, "I thought so." Captain spoke again, but his tone was different now. "So we just leave. We abandon the hunt entirely." "For now," said, "there will be other prey, easier prey. The galaxy is full of weak species waiting to be harvested. We do not need the—" But even as he said it, a part of burned with shame. He had been driven away by a single ship, a single human. It was a wound to his pride that would not heal easily. Someday, he promised himself, someday there would be a reckoning. Meanwhile, the Horizon and the refugee ship were making their slow way through space. Captain had established a tow link between the two vessels, using her own damaged engines to pull the powerless refugee ship along. It was slow going. The journey that should have taken a few days would now take weeks, but they were moving, and that was what mattered. Spent most of her time on the bridge, monitoring the sensors for any sign of the returning. She did not trust that they were truly gone. Predators like that did not give up easily. Captain Ho said during one of these long watches, "You should rest. We can handle the watch." "I will rest when we reach safe space," replied, "not before." Ho hesitated. "May I ask you something personal, Captain?" "You may ask, I may not answer." "Back there with were you afraid?" Was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Of course I was afraid. Only a fool would not be afraid in that situation." "You did not seem afraid." "That is because fear is not the same as hesitation," explained. "I was terrified. My heart was pounding. My hands wanted to shake. But I did not let any of that show because showing fear to a predator only encourages them." She turned to face her tactical officer. "There is a saying on Earth, feel the fear and do it anyway. That is what it means to be brave, Ho. Not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it." Ho nodded slowly. "I understand, Captain, I think." "You did well back there," added. "All of you did. We faced down impossible odds and we did not blink. That is something to be proud of." On the refugee ship, the mood had shifted dramatically. What had been a tomb of despair was now alive with cautious hope. The still faced an uncertain future, but at least now they had a future to face. Had emerged from his grief-stricken paralysis and was working to organize his people. There were repairs to be made, supplies to be rationed, and wounded to be treated. He threw himself into the work, grateful for anything that would keep his mind occupied. Worked beside him, and together they began the slow process of restoring some semblance of order to the battered ship. "The humans want to know if we need any medical supplies," she reported during one of their meetings. "Their doctor says she can come aboard if we have critical cases." "We have many critical cases," admitted. "Our medical bay was destroyed in the initial attack. We have been doing what we can with basic supplies." "I will arrange for the human doctor to visit," said. "The humans seem very eager to help." "They are remarkable," said softly. "I have met many species in my life, many cultures, many peoples, but I have never encountered anyone like the humans." "They are," Death pointed out, like the, and yet completely different. They use their strength to take from others. The humans use their strength to protect. It is as if they evolved the same abilities but made opposite choices about how to use them." He shook his head in wonder. "I used to think that strength and compassion were incompatible, that to be powerful meant to be cruel. The humans have shown me I was wrong." The human doctor, a young woman named One, arrived on the refugee ship a few hours later. She brought medical supplies, equipment, and a team of assistants. She also brought something else, something that had almost forgotten existed. Kindness. One moved through the refugee ship with gentle efficiency, treating wounds and diagnosing illnesses with skill and compassion. She smiled at children and held the hands of the elderly. She spoke softly and moved carefully, always mindful of how frightening a human might appear to species that had heard the stories. Little watched her from a distance, fascinated and afraid. This was a Death, a creature from a planet of monsters, and yet she did not look like a monster. She looked kind. Eventually, One noticed the small child watching her. She set down her medical scanner and approached slowly, kneeling down to bring herself to eye level. "Hello there," she said gently. "What is your name?" Did not answer. She was frozen, caught between curiosity and fear. One waited patiently. She did not push. She did not reach out. She simply waited, allowing the child to make the first move. After a long moment spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper. "My name is..." "That is a beautiful name," one said. I am a doctor. Do you know what a doctor does?" Nodded slowly. "You help people who are hurt." "That is right. I help people who are hurt. Is there anyone here who is hurt? Anyone you think I should help?" Thought about it. Then she pointed to an old male sitting in a corner, clutching his arm. Old hurt his arm. He will not let anyone look at it. One smiled. "Thank you, I will go check on him." She stood up, but before she left, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object. It was a little figure of an animal, carved from some kind of hard material. "This is a cat," she said, showing it to. "It is an animal from my world. They are small and soft and very good at catching things. Would you like to have it?" Stared at the little figure. It was beautiful, with delicate details and a graceful pose. "For me?" she asked. "For you," one confirmed. "To remind you that even on death worlds there are gentle things." She placed the figure in his hands and then went to check on. Held the cat figure close to her chest. For the first time since the burning, she felt something other than fear and sadness. She felt hope. Was resistant at first. He did not want to admit that he was injured. He had been trying to stay strong for the children, to be a source of stability in the chaos. Admitting weakness seemed like a betrayal of that duty. But one was persistent in her gentle way. "I am not asking you to stop being strong," she said. "I am asking you to let me help you stay strong. An injured arm cannot hold children. A treated arm can." Eventually, relented. One examined his arm and found a fracture, old and poorly healed. She set it properly and applied a healing brace. "You have been carrying this injury for a long time," she observed. "Since the evacuation," admitted. "There were more important things to worry about." "There is nothing more important than your health," one said firmly. "Not to the children who depend on you, not to the people who look to you for guidance. You matter, your life matters, please remember that." Looked at this strange, soft creature who had come from a world of monsters. He saw no monster before him. He saw only kindness. "Why do you care so much?" he asked. "We are strangers to you, you owe us nothing." One smiled. "On Earth we have a concept called Ubuntu. It means that my humanity is tied to your humanity. When you suffer, I suffer. When you heal, I heal. We are all connected, all part of the same great web of life. Helping you is not a burden, it is a privilege." She finished treating his arm and stood up. "Rest now, let the brace do its work, and if you need anything at all, just call for me." She moved on to the next patient, leaving to ponder her words. Connected, part of the same web. It was a strange philosophy, a beautiful philosophy, and perhaps, just perhaps, it was true. As one continued her work, as the horizon continued its slow journey through space, as they retreated to plan their next hunt, the galaxy turned on. But something had changed, something small but significant. A group of refugees who had lost everything had found hope again. A human crew who had risked everything had proven that compassion was not weakness, and a predator species that had never known fear had learned to hesitate. The ripples of this encounter would spread far and wide. Stories would be told, lessons would be learned, and perhaps, just perhaps, the galaxy would become a slightly better place because of what had happened in this small corner of space. That was the power of humans. Not their strength, not their weapons, not their death world resilience. Their love. Their stubborn, irrational, magnificent love for creatures they had never met. It was the most powerful force in the universe. And it would never, ever be defeated. 3 weeks had passed since the standoff with the 3 weeks of slow travel through the darkness of space, 2 damaged ships moving together like old friends helping each other home. The Horizon and the refugee ship had become more than just traveling companions. They had become a community. Human crew members regularly visited the refugee ship, bringing supplies and offering assistance. Survivors sometimes came aboard the Horizon, curious about the death who had saved their lives. Friendships formed across the void between the two vessels. Barriers of species and culture began to crumble, replaced by something stronger: understanding, respect, even love. Little had become a frequent visitor to the horizon. She spent hours in the medical bay with Dr. One, watching her work and asking endless questions. The tiny cat figure never left her hand. One, she asked one day, "Why did you become a doctor?" One paused in her work and considered the question. "When I was young, my grandmother got very sick. I watched the doctors fight to save her. They worked so hard with so much dedication. In the end, they could not save her, but they tried. They tried with everything they had." "That is sad," said. "It was sad," One agreed, "but it also showed me something important. Life is precious, every life, and there is no greater calling than to protect life, to heal wounds, to ease suffering. That is why I became a doctor, not because I always win, but because trying is worth everything." Thought about this. The doctors tried to save people during the burning. Many of them died. "They died doing the most important work in the universe," One said gently. "They died as heroes." "Were they death too?" One smiled. "Every creature that fights to survive, that protects those it loves, that refuses to give up even when everything seems hopeless. In a way, every one of them is a death. Your people survived the burning, you survived. That makes you as strong as any human." Looked at the little cat figure in her hand. "I want to be a doctor," she said quietly. "I want to help people like you do." One felt tears prick at her eyes. She knelt down and took small hands in her own. "Then you will be a wonderful doctor," she said. "The universe needs more healers, especially ones who have known pain and survived it. You will understand your patients in ways that others cannot." From across the medical bay, Old watched this exchange with a full heart. His arm had healed completely under One's care, and he had taken to helping around the ship however he could. But his real purpose was watching over the children, especially. She had changed so much in these 3 weeks. The emptiness in her eyes had been replaced by a spark of life. She smiled now. She laughed. She dreamed of the future instead of dwelling in the nightmares of the past. The humans had done that, not with weapons or power, but with kindness. On the bridge of the horizon, Captain received the news she had been waiting for. "We are approaching the station," Captain reported. "They have confirmed our docking request and are preparing to receive the refugees." Nodded, relief flowing through her. Station was a major hub in neutral space, run by a coalition of peaceful species. They would be safe there. They could rest, recover, and begin the long process of rebuilding their lives. "Signal the refugee ship," she ordered. "Let them know we have arrived." On the vessel, the announcement was met with a mixture of emotions: joy at finally reaching safety, sadness that the journey was ending, and a deep, profound gratitude that would never fade. Gathered his people in the largest cargo bay for a final meeting. 342, all that remained of their once great civilization, stood together and listened to their elder speak. "My friends," began, his voice thick with emotion, "we have survived. Against all odds, against all expectations, we have survived. And we owe that survival to the humans who came to our aid when no one else would." He paused, collecting himself. 3 weeks ago, I stood on the bridge of this ship and watched death approach, 12 warships coming to slaughter us. I had accepted that we would die. I had made my peace with it. His 4 arms spread wide, encompassing everyone in the room. But then the humans came. 1 ship, 1 captain, 1 crew. They placed themselves between us and destruction. They looked death in the eye and refused to blink. And against all reason, against all logic, they won. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. "I have thought much about what happened that day," continued. "I have wondered why the humans did what they did. They had nothing to gain. They risked everything. By any rational calculation, their actions made no sense." He smiled, a sad and beautiful expression. But humans are not rational, not in the way we understand rationality. They operate on a different kind of logic, a logic of the heart. They see suffering and they cannot look away. They see injustice and they cannot stand idle. They see lives in danger and they will move mountains to save them. This is their gift to the galaxy, not their technology, not their strength, not their resilience, their compassion, their stubborn, unreasonable, magnificent compassion. Raised his arms toward the ceiling. Today we arrive at station. Today we begin a new chapter in the story of but we must never forget this chapter. We must never forget what the humans did for us. And when our strength is restored, when our people are rebuilt, we must pay this debt forward. We must become like the humans. We must stand for those who cannot stand for themselves. He lowered his arms and looked directly at his people. This is our new purpose. This is how we honor those we lost and those who saved us. We will be the helpers. We will be the protectors. We will be the light in the darkness, just as the humans were the light in our darkness. The cargo bay erupted in cheers, embraced each other, crying and laughing. Children danced, elders wept. In the corner held close. "Did you hear that, little one?" he whispered. "We have a purpose now, a reason to go on." Nodded against his chest. "We are going to help people like Captain." "Yes," said, "we are going to help people, and someday, somewhere, some other species will be in danger, and we will be there for them, just as the humans were there for us." The docking procedure took several hours. Station was a massive structure, home to millions of beings from hundreds of species. It floated in neutral space like a city among the stars, a beacon of cooperation and peace. The refugees disembarked slowly, carefully. Many of them had not set foot on a solid surface in months. The station's artificial gravity felt strange beneath their feet. Waiting for them were representatives from the Diaspora Foundation, an organization established to help survivors of the burning. There were not many such organizations, but this one had persevered, holding on to hope that more survivors would be found. And now 342 more had been found. Captain and her crew stood at the docking port, watching the refugees file past. Many of them stopped to thank the humans, to touch their hands, to bow in gratitude. Some could not speak through their tears. Others spoke too much, pouring out their feelings in a flood of words. Accepted it all with grace and humility. "You saved us," an elderly woman said, gripping his hand. "You saved all of us." "You saved yourselves," replied. "We just helped a little." The woman shook her head. "No, you did more than that. You showed us that the universe is not as dark as we thought. You showed us that there is still good, still kindness, still hope." She pressed something into his hand and then moved on, following the stream of refugees into the station. Looked down at the object. It was a small pendant, delicately carved from what appeared to be bone. It depicted a figure reaching up toward the sky. "It is a symbol from our mythology," said, approaching. "The seeker of stars. It represents hope in the face of despair, the belief that there is always something worth reaching for." Closed her fingers around the pendant. "Thank you, I will treasure it." Bowed deeply, his forearms spread in the most respectful gesture his culture knew. "No, Captain, thank you for everything." He straightened and met her eyes. There was still pain there, still grief for everything he had lost, but there was also something else: strength, determination, purpose. "We will not forget," he said. "We will tell our children about this day, and they will tell their children. And for as long as they exist, the name of Captain and the crew of the Horizon will be remembered. You are heroes. You are legends. You are the light that saved us from the darkness." Did not know what to say. She was not used to being called a hero or a legend. She had just done what seemed right. "Just live well," she finally said. "Be happy, be kind, that is all the thanks we need." Nodded. "We will, I promise." He turned and followed his people into the station. leaving the human crew standing at the docking port. Ho stepped up beside his captain. "That was quite something," he said quietly. "Yes," agreed, "it was." "Do you think we will see them again?" Looked at the pendant in her hand, at the little figure reaching for the stars. "I think we will," she said. "Someday, somewhere, our paths will cross again, and when they do, I think we will find that they have become something wonderful." She turned to face her crew. "All right, everyone, we have a long road home. Our engines need repairs, our supplies need restocking, and I need at least 3 days of sleep. Let us get to work." The crew dispersed, each going to their stations, each carrying with them the knowledge that they had done something truly good. And as the horizon slowly limped away from station, beginning the long journey back to human space, a story began to spread. The story of a distress signal that no one was supposed to answer. The story of a predator fleet that should have won. The story of one human ship that stood against the darkness. It spread from station to trading posts and outposts. It spread from merchant ships to diplomatic vessels. It spread through the galactic networks and the back-channel communications that connected all sentient beings. The story changed with each telling, as stories do. Some versions made the horizon larger, more powerful, armed with impossible weapons. Some versions gave Captain superhuman abilities, the power to destroy fleets with a single word. Some versions made the into legendary monsters, evil beyond comprehension. But the core of the story remained the same. Humans had come. Humans had saved those who could not save themselves. Humans had proven that compassion was stronger than cruelty. In the council chambers of a dozen civilizations, leaders discussed what this meant. In the classrooms of 100 worlds, teachers shared the story with their students. In the homes of countless families, parents told their children about the death who chose to protect instead of prey. And slowly, gradually, the perception of humanity began to shift. They were no longer just the scary species from the death world. They were no longer just the unpredictable newcomers to the galactic community. They were something more. They were heroes. They were protectors. They were the species that would stand between the innocent and the predators, no matter the odds. On a hunting vessel, far from station, Commander heard the stories. He heard how his retreat had been portrayed, how he had been driven away by human courage and determination. He heard the mockery and the disbelief and the grudging respect. And he swore vengeance. Someday, he promised himself, someday there would be a reckoning. Someday humans would learn that you cannot humiliate and escape consequences. But that was a story for another day. For now, the story that mattered was the story of hope. Hope found in the darkness of space. Hope carried on the wings of a single human ship. Hope that no amount of despair could ever completely extinguish. Because somewhere in the galaxy, there were creatures who would never stop reaching for the stars, never stop fighting for those who could not fight for themselves, never stop believing that even in the darkest times, light could be found. Those creatures were called humans, and the universe was a better place because of them. Far away, on station, Little looked out a window at the stars. She held her cat figure in one hand and the memory of human kindness in her heart. She was no longer afraid of the darkness, because she knew now that the darkness was not empty. It was full of stars. And sometimes when you needed them most, those stars came to save you.